It's a pleasure to be here today. For all those who are out of state, I'd like to welcome you to the Constitution State. As it says, my name is Phil Inkel. I was born and raised here, in a small town called Colchester. It's a very quaint New England town. A lot of well-to-do people there. There's usually a lot of law and order. A little bit about my background. As I said, raised in Colchester. I played football there for 9 years. I was a medical response technician, a volunteer firefighter. I went to private schools. I served time in the United States Infantry. I traveled around the world. I'm a little bit educated. I don't have a degree, but I have a desire to learn. Spring of 1993, it was my introduction to police, what I call illegality. With my 3 children, I was at McDonald's Playland. I was sipping coffee, my children were playing, and about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I watched as a wiry 15-year-old boy was beaten by 2 stockily built police officers. They did not arrest the boy. They simply beat him, basically because he wears baggy pants. He dressed a little bit like MTV. The police in town, they feel that that's a gangster image, and they don't approve of that. About a month later, July 3rd, 1993, I learned what it feels like to be a victim, a retaliated against victim. It was James Nardella came to my door without a warrant. He came with another fellow by the name of Charles Scott Thomas. Charles Scott Thomas has a little bit of a history, including, as the state of Connecticut calls, cruel and inhumane treatment to the mentally ill. He was a security guard for the Whiting Forensic Institute in Middletown, Connecticut. Yet my town still hired him with a record like that, or maybe because of his record. Anyways, without a warrant, they entered my home, despite my request for them to leave, despite my request for them not to enter. To enforce their unlawful assault upon me, their retaliation for speaking out against what happened to the juvenile Michael Sienkiewicz, they were going to use their guns. Charles Thomas started drawing his gun, and it got a little bit scary. Around that day, they had come back with a number of police officers, in which case I was arrested at gunpoint, 3 or 4 of them. I was kept in custody for over 10 hours. My first hour of custody, I went to Lieutenant Wheeler, the commander of Troop K at the time, and I told him I wanted to make a complaint. His response was, he locked me up again in handcuffs, brought me to the police car, and sent me with the state trooper Nick Papiti to the Norwich Baptist Hospital, whereupon I was given a psychiatric evaluation. Troop K. After 10 hours, I was finally charged with the hideous crime of breach of peace and given a $500 bond. Posted bond, and I went about my own business. That event there sort of really, I gained acknowledgement that there was a problem. What I felt had happened was really wrong. A couple days later, I went to Troop K State Police Barracks, and I told them I again wanted to make a complaint. The state trooper supervisor, the ship supervisor came out, put his arm around me, and he walked me to the door, and he said, Phil, why don't you just drop the whole thing and be thankful you're still alive, as he put it. Well, I didn't really drop it. I continued on. Some of the younger people in town started approaching me, and they started telling me their stories, their run-ins with the police, stories of being beaten without being arrested, stories of constantly, I'm talking 10, 11, 12 times driving through town throughout the week, and each one of those times they would be stopped, their cars would be searched, they'd be thrown up against the cars. Sometimes they'd have cocked pistols put to the back of their heads. I would ask them one thing. I'd say, well, did you make a complaint? And they'd all say the same thing. Well, some of them have and some of them have not. However, they all said none of them had a belief that a complaint would work. Anyways, from that time, from July of 93 to May of 94, I was arrested 4 times. Each one of the times I was arrested was preceded by a complaint. My complaint complaints went to the town mayor, Jenny Contois. My complaints went to their resident trooper, Fred Brigger. My complaints went to Lieutenant Wheeler, the commander of Troop K, and so on and so on. Many complaints to the appropriate agencies, the agencies that should have taken some steps to alleviate the passion of mine. I went about interviewing these what I call socially disadvantaged youth, and I started documenting what was happening. I believe the police caught wind of it, Colchester Town Police, the Connecticut State Police. They came after me a few other times without arresting me. They chased me. One time I had my 4-year-old boy in the back of my bike, and I had a good run for it, but I got away. I'm pretty glad about that. But as I said, there was 4 other arrests, and I wasn't so fortunate those times.
Excuse me, Phil. Did any of those charges ever stick?
All charges were dismissed on August 28, 1995. That's 2 years of being prosecuted. Most of the evidence against me was perjured testimony by the police officers. All charges dismissed. There was no plea bargains. Okay, but let me tell you something. 2 years of being prosecuted is an ordeal in itself. That's every single day. I woke up wondering, am I going to jail? Am I going to be separated from my children for a very long time? Am I going to be convicted as a felon? Am I going to lose my civil liberties, civil rights? Are my children going to have to live with that? It was a big ordeal for me. However, the further I went forward, the more I was retaliated against, the more dangerous it became. And I have to say that every single event that happened, I was shocked that it happened, but I could never believe it would go into the next phase. In April of 1994, pretty much one year after all this had begun, I collected over 30 witness statements of severe abuses of authority of law. And I started fearing not only for my own life, but for those that were being abused. So I called the United States Attorney's Office, and I spoke to Assistant United States Attorney John Durham. I talked to him for over an hour and a half, telling him that the local police in the town of Colchester were abusing the civil rights of many people, and that they were indeed retaliating against those that had made complaints about them. He told me to keep on taking these statements, keep my mouth quiet, don't tell anybody that we had this conversation, and someone will be in touch with you soon. Well, 1 month after that, in I think it was May 21st, 94, I had gone for a bike ride with my youngest child, Jessica. She was, I believe, 2 at the time, again riding on the back seat of the bike. So with my wife, and we were traveling through the center of town, and all of a sudden, pow, pow, 2 gunshots right next to us. So I immediately fell off my bike. I dove, hit the ground, and Melody, my wife, she was with the child, they went to the ground also. I belly crawled, I looked around the corner. This is in the center of town. And I look, and lo and behold, who I see? I see Officer James Nardella and Charles Scott Thomas. Charles Scott Thomas holstering his weapon, both with a little smile on their face. They looked at me, I looked at them, he told me, he said, "Get out of here, Phil, get out of here, now." Well, I got out. We got out pretty quick. It shook me up a little bit, a big knot in my stomach. Basically what had happened is, make a long story short, I had on my backpack all those statements. The police came after me. I was hit in the face, I was maced, I was punched, kicked, thrown down to the ground. I had a knee put to my back, I was kicked. Quite a while, I was handcuffed, kicked, punched, so on. There's some medical reports to that, no broken bones, but a lot of soft tissue damage. I was charged with criminal trespassing, breach of peace, interfering with a police officer, and assault on a police officer. I spent 5 days incarcerated before I was bonded out on that one.
Excuse me, Phil. Was this the incident where the person saw you being beaten?
Yes. There was a lot of witnesses that day, many. I'd say I have over 26 documented witnesses. 2 of those witnesses were Stephen Murzin and Ian Murzin. Stephen had just come home on leave from the Marines. He had just driven through the drive-thru of McDonald's, and he was waiting to receive his food. There was a little bit of a back order. And when he opened his eyes and saw, pretty much what shocked him? Well, he made a complaint to Troop K in the same way that I had done a year earlier. A couple days after he made his complaint, at 2 o'clock in the morning, armed without a warrant, just their authority of law here in Connecticut, they entered his home, took him out of bed, handcuffed him, brought him to the basement of Troop K. The state police call that the interview room, but there's a term that others use for that room. They call it the beating room, okay? And they use that room because there is no cameras there, nor audio recording equipment. Stephen was beaten, he was choked to the point of unconsciousness, he was football kicked in the head, he was punched in the stomach, he was brought back up, and he was told that this is what happens when you don't keep your nose to your own business. Forget about this whole thing with Phil, and this doesn't have to happen to you again. Okay? That incident itself brought this whole story out to the open. Shortly thereafter, Attorney Matt Buckley got involved, called a press conference, and within a very short period of time, there was a lot of news coverage on this incident.
What happened to the two officers? How did it fare for them shortly?
Well, first, it was a battle to get any kind of action. Like I said, there was over a year of complaints at that time, and basically, eventually what happened is, not under their own, okay, but under pressures from the press, a huge public outcry for justice, because what had happened is the police commission got involved and said, hey, we've got to do something about this because there was 50 people camped out on the lawn saying that they've been abused by the police. So it was that forced them to start taking disciplinary actions. I have to note that up until that time, there was not one single internal affairs investigation. Yet there were dozens of complaints of serious police misconduct, investigations, and the officers escaped any kind of discipline by simply resigning.
Phil, I think for the purposes of, unfortunately, we're running out of time. Then, after the officers resigned, and I should also add, the state police at that barracks where the beating to Ian Murzin occurred were also disciplined for improper supervision. That was also published in a number of different news accounts. But what I find particularly troubling is even after this, what the officer who resigned, well, you have a published report from the Current?
Yeah, this is, while they were still police officers, okay, I got to go back a little bit and tell you about that call to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Okay, what had happened, I learned this later on. U.S. Attorney's Office called the District Attorney's Office, GA21 in Norwich, Connecticut. Okay, they want to know who this guy Phil Inkel is, and what's this about police misconduct, what's this about civil rights deprivations in the town of Colchester. Well, the investigator for the District Attorney's Office, his name was Dick Doty, responded back saying, don't listen to that guy Phil Inkel, he's nuts, he's crazy, he's a criminal, and so on and so on. May I remind you, I'm not a convicted felon, I've never been convicted of a felony. Okay?
Excuse me, Phil, have you been convicted of anything?
No, I have not. Traffic offense. So, anyways, what happens is he discharges my name, okay, which is in itself an obstruction of justice. He then goes to the offending officers and informs them that the United States Attorney's Office is inquiring about these guys, about civil rights deprivations. That's what made them mean. That's why they came after me on May 24 of 94 and literally stole that book that robbed it. They beat me and they robbed me of that bag.
Excuse me, in other words, what they did was they stole all of your statements.
Yes, they did.
Right. Okay, and now in addition to taking the statements of the affidavits of your witnesses, more to the point, how about what they did through their, what was it, their stool pigeon, I guess?
Right. Okay, well, like most police officers, they have informants. Okay, this one happens to be what they call a CI, confidential informant. He's registered with the state of Connecticut, the state police. His integrity is used to go after, he makes drug buys. In short, he goes to people, he buys cocaine, he buys various other drugs, and then he testifies against them, or he signs statements against them, and then they use these statements to apply for arrest warrants and search Todd Vashon. And what they did is kind of shocking. Like I said, each event is shocking in itself. I could never believe it would go to the next level. But what had happened is what the Hartford Current coins as Colchester officers accused of death plot. What happened is myself, another individual I don't want to name at this time, and the FBI had learned about a conspiracy to commit murder. The object of that murder was myself. The intent was to obstruct justice. It was to keep me from standing up at podiums like this and saying what I have to say.
Why don't you just read us some of the highlights of that article that was published in the Current and give us the date?
This is 28th of August, 1994, by a Hartford Current. A state police informant says he was offered $10,000 by two town police officers to make, in quotes, disappear a man who had lodged a brutality complaint against the officers. The informant, Todd Vashon, 22 of Colchester, says he interpreted the June offer from officers James Nardella and Charles Scott Thomas to mean that he was to kill the complainant, Phil Inkel. They said, in quotes, if Phil were to disappear, we'd each give you $5,000. Vashon then said in an interview Saturday, I think they believed Phil had enough on them to prosecute them. I said, man, he'd be the easiest man in the world to kill. And they agreed he'd be easy to kill.
I think that is indeed an interesting point.
I'm pursuing this. I'm pursuing this because I know this problem is not going to go away on its own. And it is a problem. It's a very big problem.
Thank you, Phil. I do appreciate it. And God bless.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you for putting this all together. Here earlier, Edmund Burke once said, all that is necessary in this world for evil to win is for enough good men to do nothing. And that's absolutely true.